Imagine for a moment that the story of the Tower of Babel was never meant as a dusty chronicle of ancient architecture, but as a mirror held up to your own soul. What you read in its lines is not a tale of scattered tribes, but the image of a divided mind struggling to rise higher by its own strength. As Emmet Fox once taught, the Bible speaks in parables of the inner life. The tower is within you, the restless attempt to climb skyward without first finding the unity of spirit. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. Think about the tower you have built inside, each brick a thought, each stone a desire, each scaffold a scheme of self-will. You have tried to climb toward peace by stacking your ambitions higher, piling on achievements, layering your mind with plans and worries. Yet the higher this structure rises, the more fragile it becomes, because the foundation is not divine order, but the scattered impulses of the human ego. This is why no tower of confusion can stand. It crumbles under its own weight, not as punishment, but as the inevitable working of spiritual law. Within your heart, the confusion of tongues is not an ancient event, but a daily experience. One part of you says, "Pursue success." Another whispers, "Seek comfort." Another demands, "Protect yourself." Still another calls, "Please others." Each of these voices speaks a different language. No wonder the climb becomes exhausting, for you are pulled in 10 directions at once. The babel within is the chatter of the divided mind, the countless voices of fear, pride, envy, and self-interest, each shouting louder than the rest. But here is the revelation. This confusion is not final. The breakdown of the tower is a mercy, for it ends a futile project. The fall is the moment when the divine says, "You cannot rise this way. There is a better path." What feels like failure is in truth a turning point. In the dust of the fallen tower, silence can finally break through. The rubble of your own striving clears the view of a sky that was always there, waiting to speak one clear word. Fox reminds us that the Bible's characters and stories are symbols. Babel is prideful thought. The confusion of languages is scattered desire. The collapse is the release of false striving. The truth is that you were never meant to climb to heaven through bricks of self-will. Heaven was always within, a state of unity, harmony, and alignment with the divine mind. You do not need to build your way there, you need to awaken to it. The first step in awakening is to recognize the tower you have been building. Where in your life are you exhausting yourself in projects born of divided motives? Perhaps in your work you chase recognition while resenting the effort. Perhaps in relationships you demand love while guarding your heart against vulnerability. Perhaps in your inner life you long for peace but continually stir the waters with anxious thoughts. These are the bricks of Babel, stacked one upon another in a futile climb. When you see this clearly, you begin to understand why confusion grows louder the higher you build. The divine law is unchanging. That which is not founded on unity cannot endure. Just as a house divided against itself cannot stand, so the tower of a divided soul must fall. Yet the fall is not your ruin, it is your liberation. In that moment, you glimpse the truth that the striving was never necessary. The Christ mind has always been present, a quiet center beneath the noise, waiting to gather your scattered voices into one language of peace. To walk this path, you must be willing to let the tower crumble. This does not mean abandoning your responsibilities or forsaking your ambitions. It means surrendering the belief that you can build your way to fulfillment by piling on more thoughts, more plans, more control. It means choosing to ground yourself in one unshakable foundation, the awareness of divine unity. From that awareness, your actions gain strength, your words find clarity, and your life takes on order without effortful striving. So, as you begin this journey through the Tower of Babel within, know that you are not learning how to construct a higher tower. You are learning how to let it fall. You are discovering that beyond the rubble lies a horizon of infinite sky, and within that sky shines the revelation of unity. This is the first step: to see the story as your own, to recognize the Babel within, and to prepare your heart for the language of spirit that will soon speak. The scattered voices inside you are like the multitude of tongues described in the Babel story, each one speaking with urgency, each one convinced of its own truth. They argue, they contradict, they clamor for your attention until your inner world becomes a marketplace of noise. One thought insists you must secure your future by controlling every outcome. Another urges you to enjoy the present without concern for tomorrow. Still another warns you against risk, while its neighbor tempts you into reckless impulse. None of these voices agree, and so the climb toward peace feels like trudging through a storm of confusion, a storm where every gust of wind carries a different command. This is the confusion of tongues that Emmet Fox would say is not merely historical, but psychological and spiritual. It is what happens when the soul forgets its center and splits into competing desires. Each desire invents a language of its own, a vocabulary of justification, fear, and demand. If you listen only at the surface of your mind, you will hear them all talking at once, and it can seem impossible to know which to trust. But beneath the clamor, there is a still voice that does not shout. That is the Christ mind. Its language is not fragmented but whole, not demanding but steady, not many but one. To reach that voice, you must first become aware of the others. You cannot overcome confusion by pretending it is not there. You must name it, hear it, and recognize it for what it is: scattered thought pretending to be truth. This recognition is not condemnation, it is clarity. The moment you can say, "This is a thought of fear, not a command of spirit," you begin to separate the false from the real, and the noise loses its authority once you understand that it is only noise. Think about how your own inner conversations resemble Babel. You wake in the morning with one plan, only to change it by noon under the pressure of another impulse. You speak kindly in one moment, then snap in the next, astonished at how such contradictions can come from the same heart. You set a goal with conviction, but within hours, you doubt whether it matters. Each of these shifts is a new language, a fresh tongue dividing your energy. When energy is divided, power is lost. Divine law teaches that power comes through unity. A laser beam is nothing but scattered light focused into one stream. A symphony is not noise, but many instruments attuned to one key. Your own mind is the same. Scattered, it weakens; unified, it transforms. The tragedy of Babel is not that humanity was punished, but that humanity lost the power of unity. When your inner voices splinter into debate, you too lose the strength of clear direction. Yet every language of confusion carries within it the hidden reminder that there is another language altogether. The false cries of fear point you toward the still assurance of spirit. The selfish urges reveal the absence of love, which itself reminds you of the love you long for. The contradiction is not meaningless, it is a compass. Each scattered voice tells you what happens when you depart from the center. If you follow the signal backward, you return to the one language of the Christ mind. Emmet Fox often said that spiritual truth is simple, while error is complicated. Confusion breeds endless words. Truth needs very few. The scattered thoughts will spin stories, lists, and arguments, while the voice of spirit may only whisper, "Be still." You recognize it not by volume, but by peace. When you hear a word within you that brings quiet strength, that is the true tongue. When you hear a demand that agitates, divides, or unsettles, that is Babel still at work. Your task is not to fight every voice, but to withdraw attention from the noise and listen deeper. Confusion does not need to be conquered by force, it dissolves when you no longer feed it with belief. The many tongues do not need to be silenced one by one. They lose their hold when you anchor yourself in the one voice that unites. It is the difference between being tossed by 1,000 waves or sinking into the depth where the water is calm. Consider your present life. How many projects, desires, or fears are speaking to you at once? How many languages of obligation, ambition, worry, or resentment are competing for dominance? That is the inner Babel. To see it clearly is the beginning of liberation, because once you know the nature of the tower, you no longer mistake it for your true self. You realize the confusion is not you, it is only a noise passing through you. And when you see it this way, you begin to sense that there is something stable beneath the shifting voices, something unchanged by the noise, something that speaks only one word. That word is unity. It does not argue with the noise, nor does it need to. It stands quietly at the center, waiting for you to listen. You have known it in moments of sudden clarity, when all doubts fade and a simple conviction rises in your heart. You have felt it in the peace that comes when you finally stop striving and allow stillness to hold you. It is the same word that spoke before the tower was ever built, the same language that has never been lost, only hidden. To dwell in that word is to step out of the storm of many voices and into the calm of the one Spirit. And as soon as you recognize it even faintly, the climb of the tower changes. You are no longer scrambling upward against the weight of confusion. You are being lifted from within, drawn by the unifying force of the Christ mind that has never ceased speaking in the language of wholeness. Human ambition has always dreamed of reaching heaven by building upward, brick upon brick, plan upon plan, strategy upon strategy. The story of Babel captures this perfectly, the image of people laboring together to construct a monument that would make them secure, proud, and powerful. Yet what collapsed that tower was not divine anger, but the law of life itself. Whatever is not rooted in spirit cannot endure. When the foundation of thought is divided, the structure eventually falls under its own weight. The same pattern appears in your own striving. You may have tried to construct peace out of possessions, believing that if you gathered enough wealth or security, the restlessness would subside. You may have stacked the bricks of achievement, imagining that success or recognition would give you the fulfillment you seek. You may have built towers of approval, reaching for the praise of others, as if their voices could silence your own doubts. But over time you discover the same truth the builders of Babel faced. No structure made of self-will can rise forever. The higher you climb on such a foundation, the shakier it becomes. This is not a condemnation of ambition itself, but a reminder of where true stability lies. Ambition guided by spirit can be noble and fruitful. Ambition cut off from spirit becomes frantic and unsustainable. The tower represents this false ascent, the attempt to touch heaven without listening to heaven's law. And the inevitable collapse is not a punishment, but a safeguard, steering you away from futility and back toward the ground of truth. When you examine your life, you may see where the tower building has drained your strength. Perhaps it was the career ladder that demanded everything but never granted the satisfaction you expected. Perhaps it was the endless climb for recognition, only to find that approval fades as quickly as it arrives. Perhaps it was the pursuit of control over every detail, building a tower of anxiety so tall that its shadow darkened every joy. The pattern is always the same. What begins as a climb toward peace becomes a structure of strain, and eventually it cannot hold. Emmet Fox's genius was in showing how these stories are mirrors, not mere history. Babel is not about ancient stone, but about the inner architecture of thought. The false ascent is not something distant. It is the daily choice to rely on your own divided strength, rather than aligning with the unity of divine mind. Every time you trust fear more than love, pride more than humility, or self-will more than spirit, you lay another brick in that fragile tower. And every time the tower trembles, you are being invited to pause and remember that only what is rooted in oneness can last. Think of the times when you chased after something with all your energy, only to feel strangely empty once you achieved it. That emptiness is the voice of spirit, reminding you that a tower cannot substitute for a foundation. The achievement itself may not be wrong, it might even be good, But when pursued without inner alignment, it becomes hollow. You climb higher but feel no closer to heaven. You arrive at the top of the tower only to find the sky still distant. The lesson is simple yet demanding. You cannot build your way to God through self-will. The mind that tries to rise by its own divided power will always fragment. The ego insists it can construct a ladder to the divine. Spirit knows that heaven is not reached by ladders at all. Heaven is discovered in the unity of thought, when your mind, heart, and will are harmonized under one law. You stop climbing and begin abiding. You stop building towers and start dwelling in the temple already within. This is why collapse, painful as it seems, is an act of mercy. The fall of a self-made tower is the unveiling of truth. It strips away illusions and reveals the futility of divided striving. And in the silence after collapse, you hear a language you had forgotten, the voice of unity. You may resist at first, mourning the loss of the structure you worked so hard to build. Yet in time you see that it was never strong enough to hold you, and its fall has set you free to seek what is lasting. The challenge now is not to fear ambition, but to refine it. Let your desire for greatness be real, but let it be aligned with spirit. Let your longing for achievement remain, but let it be grounded in love rather than pride. Let your drive for success persist, but let success mean harmony of soul rather than applause from the crowd. Then the energy that once built fragile towers can be redirected into something enduring, the steady integration of your life under divine law. As you reflect on your own towers, notice where ambition has been fueled by separation rather than unity. Notice where the language of self-will has crowded out the still voice of spirit. And see in every collapse not failure, but invitation. Each fall of the false ascent is a call to build no more towers, but to discover the strength that comes when thought, heart, and action are one with the mind of God. Desire itself is not your enemy. It is the raw material of life. Every longing, every hunger, every spark of wanting carries energy, and that energy is sacred when directed by spirit. But when desire is scattered, unexamined, and multiplied without end, it creates the inner Babel. You feel yourself pulled north and south, east and west, every craving speaking in its own tongue, demanding satisfaction as if it were the only voice that mattered. This is the babel of desires, a chorus without harmony, each voice straining against the others, each impulse competing for dominance. You can see it in the way the heart leaps at one thing while the mind insists on another. You can feel it when you try to pray for clarity, yet secretly cling to conflicting outcomes. You may want peace, yet still chase restlessness. Want love, yet guard yourself with fear. Want freedom, yet cling to control. Each of these desires is real, but they are not aligned. And when they clash, they produce inner noise so loud that the true voice of spirit is drowned out. The Bible's image of many tongues is not just about language, it is about desire itself. Every separate craving invents a language to justify its claim. One speaks in the vocabulary of pride. You must be greater, stronger, more impressive. Another in the vocabulary of fear. You must protect, defend, avoid risk. Another in the vocabulary of envy. You deserve what others have, and until you get it, you are incomplete. And so the inner city becomes filled with shouting voices, each fluent in its own dialect of demand. Emmet Fox would remind you that the law of spirit is simple. Desire must serve unity, or else it creates confusion. The Christ mind does not deny desire but gathers it into one purpose. Think of sunlight. Scattered, it warms gently but cannot ignite. Focused into a single beam, it burns with power. So it is with your soul. Scattered desires create heat without direction. Unified desire creates transformation. The moment you gather all longings into the one desire to know and reflect, spirit, confusion begins to dissolve. Consider how often you have felt weary not from the weight of one great desire, but from the endless tug of many small ones. You pursue comfort, recognition, safety, pleasure, and control, only to discover that no matter how many you satisfy, more voices keep calling. It is not the size of the tower that exhausts you. It is the endless shifting of which brick should be laid next. Your strength is drained not by action itself, but by contradiction. And contradiction, left unchecked, leads to collapse. But collapse is not the final word. When the tower falls, when the Babel of desires scatters itself into dust, you are given a rare gift: silence. For a moment, in the aftermath of broken ambitions, you hear something deeper than desire. You hear the faint but steady rhythm of the Spirit, reminding you that true satisfaction is not found in meeting every craving, but in aligning every craving to the one center. That center is love. That center is unity. That center is Christ alive within you, gathering the scattered fragments of longing into a single flame. Think about the longings that have shaped your own story. Beneath each one, if you look deeply enough, is the same root: the desire to return home to the divine. The craving for love is the soul's way of seeking the eternal embrace. The hunger for success is the soul's way of seeking recognition from the one who already knows you fully. The thirst for security is the soul's way of yearning for the unshakable ground of spirit. Even the distorted desires point back to the same source. When gathered, they reveal that all you ever truly wanted was God, and in God all desires find rest. This is why the law of spirit never condemns you for desiring. It simply teaches you to unify desire under one law. When your longings contradict, they fragment your strength. When your longings harmonize, they release a power greater than you imagined. It is not the absence of desire that sets you free, but the transformation of desire into a single song. The babel of desires can be healed the moment you choose to stop chasing each voice as if it were ultimate. You let them rise, you hear them, and then you ask, do they align with the central desire for truth, love, and unity? If not, you let them fall away, like bricks that were never meant to hold weight. If they do align, you allow them to strengthen the foundation. Slowly, the noise lessens. Slowly, the chorus of conflicting tongues becomes a choir singing one note. And in that note, you discover the peace that surpasses all striving. There is a strange kindness hidden in the collapse of the tower. At first, it feels like ruin, like failure, as if heaven itself has rejected your effort. But if you look deeper, you will see that what seemed like judgment was, in truth, protection. The scattering of plans, the sudden ending of a structure you thought would carry you upward, is the way life spares you from climbing endlessly toward emptiness. It interrupts you, not to punish, but to save you from devoting your strength to something that could never have fulfilled its promise. The mercy of collapse is difficult to recognize in the moment. All you can see are the broken stones, the wasted labor, the dust rising around your feet. You grieve the years invested, the nights of striving, the dreams you stacked like bricks. Yet in time, with hindsight, you realize that the fall prevented a greater heartbreak. Had the tower held, you might have reached its top only to find that heaven was still far away, and that all your effort had lifted you no closer to the truth. By falling, the tower revealed its weakness early, before it consumed you completely. This is one of the paradoxes of spiritual law. What appears as a setback is often a hidden deliverance. A lost opportunity clears the ground for a truer calling. An unexpected ending makes room for a beginning that could never have come otherwise. A collapse, though it shakes your life, may be the only way to release you from an illusion that was binding you. The pattern is repeated again and again. You are led away from what is unstable, so you may stand upon what is eternal. Think of the times when something fell apart against your will, the friendship that ended abruptly, the career path that dissolved when you least expected it, the plan you guarded that unraveled despite your effort. At the time it seemed cruel, unfair, senseless. Yet later, as your vision cleared, you saw the hidden hand that turned you aside. You recognized that what felt like chaos was actually guidance, redirecting you toward a place of greater wholeness. The tower fell not to crush you, but to free you from the burden of carrying its weight. The truth is that self-will is incapable of sustaining the structures it builds. You can force the climb only for so long before it cracks under strain. And though collapse feels violent, it is in fact a release. Spirit allows nothing false to stand forever. The instability reveals itself, not as punishment, but as truth made visible. In this sense, every fall is an unveiling, stripping away what was never solid and reminding you of what cannot be shaken. The invitation is to see with new eyes when you stand among the ruins. Instead of clinging to the rubble, you open your hands. Instead of mourning what cannot be restored, you wait for what will be given. Trust that the ground beneath your feet is more stable than the tower you tried to raise. Trust that when the noise of shattered ambition subsides, a new sound will emerge, a steady, unified word from the Spirit that has never left you. The collapse is not the end of your story, but the doorway into its truer chapter. In that recognition, fear loses its grip. You begin to understand that every fall carries within it the seed of freedom. What once looked like loss becomes the clearing of space. What once felt like abandonment becomes the proof that you are guided by a law higher than your own divided plans. And slowly, your grief softens into gratitude. For you see that the fall of the false tower was not destruction, but mercy disguised as dust and silence. When the tower collapses and the dust finally begins to settle, something remarkable occurs. Silence. The clamor of competing voices falls quiet, if only for a moment. The striving that once consumed your energy has stopped. The debates inside your head, the endless push and pull of conflicting desires, lose their urgency. You may stand in the ruins uncertain, shaken, even grieving, but underneath all of that is an opening, a rare stillness that was hidden from you, while the tower stood tall. This silence is not empty. It is alive, pregnant with possibility. For in the absence of noise, you begin to notice a voice that had always been there, waiting. It does not shout or demand. It does not argue or plead. It speaks with a steady calm, a quiet authority. It is the Christ mind, the inner unity that never fragments, the eternal word that was drowned out by the many tongues of Babel. When you first hear it, it may sound faint, fragile, as if it could be lost at any moment. Yet the more you listen, the more you realize it was never fragile. It was you who had been too distracted to hear. In this silence, the true nature of spirit begins to reveal itself. You start to sense that what you had been chasing through ambition, through desire, through divided effort, was here all along. The peace you sought in achievement, the security you tried to construct in plans, the love you strained to receive from others, all of it whispers through this inner stillness. It tells you that you were never required to climb toward heaven, because heaven was already within you. The revelation of silence is not comfortable at first. For the ego, silence feels like death. The mind, accustomed to noise, conflict, and effort, panics when nothing is left to grasp. You may feel restless, anxious, even tempted to rebuild the tower simply to avoid the emptiness. But if you can endure the stillness, if you can remain in it without fleeing, you discover that it is not emptiness at all but fullness. Beneath the surface quiet, there is a depth of presence so vast that it dwarfs every tower you could ever build. This is why so many spiritual teachers emphasize the practice of stillness. It is not because silence itself is the goal, but because silence clears away babble so the one voice can be heard. In stillness, you are not inventing peace, you are uncovering it. You are peeling away the layers of noise until the original language of unity can speak again. It is the language of spirit, and when you hear it, even for a moment, you recognize it as the truth you have always known but forgotten. Think of those rare moments in your life when everything seemed to pause. Perhaps it was standing by the ocean at dusk, when the waves moved with a rhythm that quieted your thoughts. Perhaps it was the hush after a storm, when the world seemed washed clean and the air hung heavy with peace. Perhaps it was a moment of surrender, when you finally stopped resisting and felt a strength greater than your own, holding you. Those moments were not accidents, they were glimpses of the silence after Babel. In the silence, something else happens: clarity. Questions that once seemed tangled begin to unravel. Decisions that felt impossible lose their weight. The inner noise that made everything urgent and confusing fades, and you sense what matters most with a kind of effortless certainty. It is not that every answer appears fully formed, but that you no longer feel desperate to control them. You trust that the same presence that speaks in silence will guide you in time. This is the beginning of unity, not the forced unity of willpower, but the natural unity of alignment with spirit. The many voices are not conquered, they simply fall quiet in the presence of the one. The false desires lose their grip because the deeper desire is satisfied. The need to build towers evaporates when you realize that the foundation is already whole. The silence is not the end of the journey, but it is the turning point. It marks the moment when your life ceases to be driven by scattered striving and begins to be shaped by inner harmony. From here, everything changes not in a sudden blaze of miracle, but in the steady unfolding of peace. You find yourself less hurried, less reactive, less bound to the demands of the tower. You carry within you the soundless word of unity, and it steadies you no matter what rises or falls around you. There is a language beneath all languages, a current beneath all currents, and when you touch it, the mind stops scrambling for a translation. It does not come as a torrent of explanations or a stack of reasons. It arrives as a simple knowing that steadies your hands and clears your face. Where Babel multiplies dialects of fear and demand, this language speaks one word in many forms: order, through love. You know it by its tone before you know it by its content. It never bullies, it never flatters. It carries a quiet authority that does not need to raise its voice because reality itself supports it. This is the tongue of spirit, the Christ mind within you, and it has a recognizable grammar. The first rule is coherence. Thought, word, and deed point in the same direction. When you are about to speak from anger while claiming peace, the language of spirit will not translate. It will pause you. When you promise what you cannot honor, it will feel like a stone in the mouth. When you attempt a kind act to manipulate an outcome, the syntax breaks, and you hear the fracture in your own tone. Coherence returns when you choose the clean sentence, the one that asks nothing unspoken, carries no hidden barb, and needs no performance to be true. The second rule is simplicity. Truth requires very few syllables. The more your inner voice piles on justifications, the more you can suspect that Babel is drafting the paragraph. Spirit often speaks in short lines that land as direction, not debate. Wait, release, repair, begin. These words do not argue their case, they reveal it. You recognize them because, once obeyed, they produce clarity rather than further explanation. The result is not triumph, but alignment, your interior joints set back into place. The third rule is fruit. Spirit's language is known by what grows after you speak it or act upon it. Where the divided tongue breeds residue, resentment, confusion, the need to keep explaining, the one tongue leaves clean ground. You may feel tender, but you will not feel dirty. You may feel stretched, but you will not feel split. You may need to wait, but you will not need to scheme. Even when the guidance costs you comfort, it gives you strength. If the fruit is steadiness, you heard correctly. If the fruit is turmoil that feeds on itself, you were listening to a counterfeit. There is also a physiology to this language. The body loosens as the words form inside you. The shoulders drop, breath deepens, jaw unclenches. You sense more space in a room that has not changed size. Disagreement may remain, but hostility drains out of the moment as if a window has been opened. Your attention sharpens without becoming narrow, your field widens without losing focus. This is not sentimentality. It is congruence, returning to a system that was misaligned. The nervous system recognizes truth more quickly than the intellect does, and it often celebrates before the mind can draft a thesis. In daily practice, the one language looks like very ordinary choices handled with unusual integrity. You answer the message now, because delay would turn honest uncertainty into avoidance. You decline with a clean no, rather than a Baroque excuse that will require future repairs. You apologize without placing a cushion of justification under your words. You keep the small promise no one is tracking because your soul is tracking it. Each act says in plain speech, I will be one person in thought, word, and deed. Babel cannot breathe in such air. It disperses. Fox would say the mind becomes powerful as it becomes single. Singleness is not stubbornness. It is the condition in which your capacities no longer argue. Intellect contributes its clarity without usurping the heart's authority. Will supplies stamina without hijacking direction. Imagination envisions futures that serve love rather than vanity. Listen for the verbs the one language prefers: align, bless, repair, reconcile, create, release. When a verb like threaten, dazzle, corner, or punish starts shining in your inner lexicon, you can assume Babel is backstage moving props. Because Spirit's speech is universal, it translates across contexts without losing tone. In work, it sounds like precision. Do the next true thing at the right scale, for the right reason. In relationships, it sounds like regard. See the image of God in this person and speak as though that image could hear you. In solitude, it sounds like sane discipline. Limit inputs so the still voice stays audible. In conflict, it sounds like boundary without drama. In generosity, it sounds like yes without the hidden invoice. Wherever you place it, it reads as the same language. A frequent counterfeit arrives dressed as urgency. Urgency can be holy when life or safety is at stake. More often it is fear in a fine suit. The one language rarely shouts, now or never. It prefers now, and only what is yours to do. Another counterfeit masquerades as guilt. Guilt tries to conscript you with shame into tasks that are not yours. Spirit speaks responsibility without accusation. It does not bruise you into goodness. A third counterfeit is flattery, either of self or others. Flattery inflates and then quietly demands repayment. Spirit honors and then leaves room. If you watch the aftermath, you will know which tongue you spoke. You can train your ear. Begin the day with a single intention sentence sturdy enough to carry you. Today I will speak the cleanest, true sentence available to me. Repeat it until it steadies your cadence. Before a conversation, ask inwardly for the single verb that belongs to this moment. Clarify, listen, decide, invite, release. Let the verb choose the sentence. When the mind begins to compose an alibi, return to breath and cut the line in half. If a message needs 3 paragraphs to say what a clean sentence could say, you are likely bargaining. Shorten it until the heart nods. When confusion rises, perform a small audit using 3 questions. Does this course increase peace without requiring pretense? Does it honor the other's dignity without betraying my own? Will I be able to carry this choice tomorrow without needing to revise my story? If the answers lean yes, you are probably speaking the one language. If any answer requires contortion, hold. Babel often proposes deals that must be defended in the dark. Spirit proposes choices that can sit in daylight. As this tongue becomes familiar, your inner debates shorten. Decisions still require care, but they no longer demand theatrics. You begin to notice that many urgencies were inventions designed to keep the tower under construction. With fewer invented emergencies, energy gathers. What had been spent managing contradictions becomes available for steady work and genuine care. People feel the difference around you, not because you are louder, but because you are congruent. Your presence becomes legible. The more you speak this way, the more your desires themselves begin to learn the language. Cravings that once shouted in many dialects soften and ask to be included rather than to rule. You do not amputate your longings, you educate them. You invite each one to find its proper seat at a unified table where love sets the agenda. A desire that refuses to sit and insists on running the meeting identifies itself as a tourist from Babel. Thank it for the energy it carries and show it the door. The desire that agrees to be part of the choir can stay. Power concentrates when the choir sings one note. Eventually, the one language stops feeling like something you must remember and starts feeling like the way you naturally think. When that shift occurs, even your silence speaks. People will sense steadiness in you when you have not said a word. Rooms will ease by a degree when you enter, not because you perform serenity, but because fragmentation in you has been replaced by union. From there, gathering what was scattered is no longer theoretical work. It is simply what happens when a center holds and begins to draw its pieces home. Once you begin to recognize the one language of spirit, the next movement is not conquest but gathering. The scattered impulses, the lost tongues that have been speaking over one another, do not need to be silenced with force. They need to be brought under wise governance. Think of yourself as convening a council after a season of civil unrest. The point is not to shame the factions, but to give every energy a rightful seat under a higher charter. That charter is divine law. Love governs, truth clarifies, order serves life. When the charter is clear, even unruly energies become useful. Start by naming who's in the room. Envy shows up first, thin-voiced but intense. Fear arrives early, arms crossed, insisting on worst-case scenarios. Perfectionism lingers at the doorway, correcting the trim. Urgency bangs the table, demanding action before understanding. Avoidance tries to hide behind the curtains. Desire enters in multiples, each with a different agenda. Anger comes with heat, ready to defend the vulnerable and, when confused, the ego. None of them are villains. All of them carry power. Your work is translation and assignment. Use a simple 4-step protocol. Name, bless, sort, assign. Name the impulse plainly. This is fear. This is envy. Naming depersonalizes. It ends the trance that says, I am fear, and replaces it with fear is present. Bless the energy for what it tries clumsily to do. Fear, thank you for wanting to keep me safe. Envy, thank you for revealing what I value. Gratitude unknots defensiveness. Sort the message from the method. Anger, your method is heat. Is the message boundary or vanity? Urgency, your method is speed. Is the message importance or panic? Assign the purified energy to a role under spirit. Fear becomes prudence. Envy becomes aspiration. Anger becomes boundary. Urgency becomes focus. Desire becomes devotion. Every assignment answers to the charter. Does this serve love, produce clarity, and keep order alive? Give your inner council a constitution you can remember under pressure. 3 articles are enough. Article 1. Coherence. Thought, word, and deed must align. No strategy that requires inner fragmentation makes the cut. Article 2. Regard. Every choice must honor the dignity of all involved, including you. No victory that degrades a soul is a win. Article 3. Right scale. Do the next true thing at the right size. No grandiosity, no shrinking precision over performance. With these articles posted on the wall of awareness, each impulse is easier to seat. Perfectionism, for instance, often violates Article 3 by inflating every task to cathedral scale. Under the charter, it becomes craftsmanship. Do this well at today's size. Urgency violates Article 1 by splitting thought and action. Reassigned, it becomes timely responsiveness that keeps momentum without panic. Avoidance violates Article 2 by abandoning responsibility. In its redeemed role, it becomes Sabbath. planned, restorative rest that preserves capacity rather than leaking it. There's a practical way to run the council each morning. Give it 7 minutes, 2 minutes to write a fast inventory of active voices, 2 minutes to apply the Constitution, which article is at stake for each, 2 minutes to assign roles and first actions, 1 minute to seal the day with a single sentence, a North Star line you can repeat when noise rises. Today, I will move at the speed of clarity and the scale of love. That sentence is not decoration, it is cadence. It sets the metronome so your steps stay musical. Keep translation tools on hand. A few examples. Envy to value map. List what you envy. Translate each item into a value you want to embody. Then choose one small practice that builds that value without comparison. Envy stops shouting when it has a job. Fear to red team. Let fear list 3 risks. Thank it, mitigate what is real, and release what is fantasy. Fear exhale becomes vigilance, a guard, not a jailer. Anger to boundary script. Draft a clean 2-sentence boundary you could speak without heat. Anger cools when it trusts you to protect what matters. Urgency to triage board. Everything gets labeled now, soon, or later. Then you do one now, park the rest, and refuse to negotiate with adrenaline. Avoidance to tiny start. Commit to 2 minutes. Often the task wanted dignity, not drama. Momentum returns the moment you begin. Use the body to ratify what the council decides. Otherwise, decisions stay abstract. Choose one posture that means aligned. Feet flat, shoulders down, jaw soft. One breath that means reset. Inhale 4 counts, exhale 6. And one gesture that means seal, hand to chest, brief nod. Each time you apply an article or complete an assignment, let the body mark it. The nervous system learns faster than the intellect. Ritual makes law tactile. Watch your energetic budget. Fragmentation spends without receipts. Unity accounts. Before you commit, ask, what does this cost? In attention, emotion, time. Can I pay it without borrowing from tomorrow's clarity? If not, scale it down until Article 3 is satisfied. Many towers fell because a day's task was treated like a decade's destiny. The Charter protects you from heroic waste. Because we are social creatures, your counsel extends into conversations. Before a difficult exchange, pick your verb clarify, repair, decide, bless, release. Let the verb govern tone and length. A repair verb shortens speeches. A bless verb softens face and pace. A decide verb keeps you from wandering into therapy when a choice is due. Verbs discipline the room. They also keep babble from authoring your replies. Expect counteroffers from old habits. Babel will try to rebrand itself as principle. Panic calling itself passion. Avoidance calling itself peace. Flattery calling itself kindness. Test each offer by fruit, not promise. Does this path leave the ground clean or sticky with residue? Can the story stand in daylight without edits? If you must add footnotes to make a choice look kind, it isn't. If you need a future apology to justify today's tactic, you already know. As the days accumulate, you'll notice tangible changes. The room inside grows quieter. Re-entry after interruptions is swifter. Decisions stop generating hangovers. You sleep more easily because you are not managing a shadow cabinet through the night. Serendipity, what looked like luck, shows up more, because attention freed from firefighting perceives opportunities sooner. None of this requires perfection. It requires fidelity to the Charter when it would be easier to default to habit. When a true crisis hits, the Council does not dissolve, it contracts to essentials. Article 1. Keep coherence. Tell the clean truth to yourself and to others. Article 2. Guard dignity. No panicked blame, no weaponized shame. Article 3. Act at right scale, stabilize what's bleeding, postpone what can wait, refuse to add a second problem to the first. Even in alarms, the lost tongues remember their seats. Fear points out exits. Anger carries courage to confront. Urgency moves the hands. Desire keeps you tethered to what the effort is for. Under spirit, the same energies that once fractured you become a team. There is a subtler fruit, too, affection for your own interior city. Instead of hating parts of yourself, you begin to respect their original intent. The misfires feel less like proof of defect and more like invitations to educate power. You stop exiling energies and start sponsoring their maturation. That sponsorship changes how you see others. If your counsel can be taught, perhaps theirs can too. Contempt yields to patience without weakening your boundaries. As governance takes root, a steady cadence rises in the center, not as concept but as felt speech. It sounds like a single ancient syllable humming under thought, the tone by which the garden once named things without distortion. It rises from the chest more than the head, and when it speaks, even briefly, all departments look up and understand. What begins as counsel becomes chorus, and the note they hold together is simple enough to guide you through any street you must walk next. When the chorus begins to hold its note, a strange inversion occurs. What once looked like external chaos, 1,000 competing demands, shifting circumstances, unpredictable people no longer overwhelms you in the same way. You realize that the confusion outside was always amplified by the confusion inside. With the council seated and the language clarified, the outer world still moves in complexity, but it no longer has unlimited access to your nervous system. The noise strikes the air around you, but it no longer penetrates the marrow of your being. This does not mean you walk untouched by difficulty. It means you have a center that interprets difficulty differently. Where Babel made you read every disruption as a threat, Unity teaches you to read disruption as information. The delayed flight, the missed deadline, the argument, the unexpected expense, none of them are final verdicts. They are signals that invite translation. What needs adjustment? What needs release? What needs perseverance? Instead of collapsing into panic or rage, you remain in the position of interpreter, asking not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What can be realigned here?" In practice, this shifts your whole posture toward life. You stop seeing yourself as a fragile tower exposed to every gust of wind. You begin to see yourself as a rooted tree whose branches may bend, whose leaves may scatter, but whose trunk stands firm in the soil of spirit. Storms do not stop being storms. They stop being dictators of your state. The storm outside is answered by stillness inside, and because of that stillness, you act with greater precision, not greater panic. Clarity begins to spread outward. The people around you may not know why they feel different in your presence, but they sense it. Your words carry less static. Your face registers less tension. Your choices are less reactive. You no longer add to the background noise of the world, you reduce it. This does not make you passive. It makes you more decisive. The same energy that once fueled frantic striving now fuels clean action. Notice how this ripples into relationships. Arguments lose their addictive pull when you are not trying to win Babel's debates. Conversations shorten because you do not need to over-explain or defend what is already clear in you. People trust you more readily, not because you force agreement, but because your speech has stopped splintering into contradictions. Trust is not built on brilliance, it is built on coherence. Others can disagree with you, yet still sense your steadiness, and that steadiness becomes contagious. The process also changes your relationship to desire. When the inner voices were scattered, desire felt like a swarm, many cravings flying in different directions, demanding attention you could not give. Under unity, desire feels like a current, one deep river moving steadily. You still want things, but the wanting is aligned rather than fragmented. Instead of draining you, desire fuels you. You can pursue a goal without losing yourself in desperation, because the goal is not a tower, it is an expression of the current already moving within. Consider how this changes your perception of time. In Babel, time feels like an enemy. Never enough of it, always slipping, always demanding more. In unity, time becomes a servant. You realize that you cannot do everything, but you can always do the next true thing, and the next true thing is enough. This recognition does not make you slower, it makes you more effective. Instead of scattering energy across 20 false starts, you give sustained attention to what is yours to do. The result is not only greater peace, but greater accomplishment. This posture is not sterile. It is deeply alive. Some people fear that inner silence or unity will flatten them into dullness. The opposite is true. When the babble of noise dies down, the color of life sharpens. You hear music more vividly. You feel textures more acutely. You see faces with greater tenderness. Because you are not busy constructing towers in the mind, you can finally enter the world that already exists around you. Unity opens the senses, because unity removes the filter of distraction. And when suffering arrives, as it will, unity gives you a different set of tools. Instead of drowning in despair, you allow sorrow to move through you without breaking you. Instead of pretending strength, you let Spirit supply strength. Instead of asking, "How do I escape this?" you ask, "How do I remain whole within this?" You discover that pain does not always fracture, it can deepen. Unity does not prevent loss. It transforms loss into an opening through which compassion and wisdom expand. In the end, unity does not mean uniformity. You will still have moods, differences of opinion, shifting circumstances. The point is not to erase variety, but to harmonize it. Just as a choir holds many voices that together create one song, your life holds many movements that together express one essence. What matters is that the song continues, not that every note is identical. The tower tries to reach heaven through height. The choir reaches heaven through harmony. And harmony is what your life is beginning to learn. When the interior choir steadies its note, creativity emerges as a natural consequence rather than a forced performance. Before, creation was tangled in Babel's confusion. You started projects that splintered halfway, driven by urgency more than clarity. You pursued goals that were never truly yours, then abandoned them when the counterfeit voices grew louder. But when unity gathers the inner city, creativity changes its nature. It no longer strains to prove worth or build towers of recognition. Instead, it flows as an inevitable expression of order inside you. This is why true creation feels less like invention and more like revelation. You are not generating something from nothing. You are aligning with a pattern already alive in the deeper currents of spirit. The ancients called it the Logos, the living blueprint of divine intelligence. When the mind is divided, you cannot hear it. The static covers its rhythm. But once you learn to speak the one language within, the pattern becomes audible again. What you create in the outer world is simply the translation of what you have already heard inwardly. That is why some of your best work arrives with a sense of familiarity. You recognize it even as you shape it. You find yourself saying, "This feels like it already existed and I am only uncovering it." That recognition is not arrogance, it is confirmation that you have moved into resonance with Spirit's blueprint. The scattered tongues of Babel invent endlessly but rarely finish. The unified tongue reveals steadily and completes. Pay attention to the way creation feels in this state. It does not arrive as manic frenzy, as though a deadline is breathing down your neck. It comes as steady fire, hot enough to keep you working, calm enough to keep you clear. Hours pass without the drain of fragmentation. When you step away, you feel satisfied rather than depleted. Even in imperfection, you sense integrity. The project may need revision, but the work carries coherence from its foundation. This coherence spreads beyond personal projects into how you shape the world around you. You begin to notice that environments bend toward the order you hold inside. A cluttered room becomes easier to organize because your mind is not adding clutter to the task. A broken process at work becomes easier to repair because you no longer see it as an enemy, but as a system awaiting alignment. A difficult relationship becomes easier to navigate because your presence is not pouring extra static into the exchange. Creation is no longer a matter of control, it is a matter of participation with order itself. Emmet Fox often said that life reflects thought, and when thought is clear, life cannot help but reflect that clarity. But clarity is not achieved by tightening control or silencing parts of yourself. It is achieved by union, the gathering of scattered energies into harmony. From that harmony, your thoughts stop contradicting one another. They stop building towers they cannot maintain. They begin to broadcast a steady signal, and the world reflects what is broadcast. This is why small acts under unity carry unusual power. A letter written with coherence communicates more than elaborate arguments written in division. A single kind gesture done from order carries more weight than dozens done from guilt or compulsion. A business decision made from the one language creates ripple effects that strategy alone could never engineer. Unity sharpens intention, and intention sharpens manifestation. But beware the temptation to use this as a technique for control. If you slip back into Babel's mindset, you will try to bend Spirit's law to serve your personal agenda. You will attempt to manifest what your divided desires clamor for, and when it fails, you will call the law unreliable. The law is not unreliable. Your signal was scattered. The point is not to use unity as a trick to get what you want. The point is to let unity refine what you want until it matches what Spirit already wills. Then manifestation follows as a natural consequence. Think of unity as tuning an instrument. When your strings are tightened unevenly, no amount of skill can make the song beautiful. But when the strings are tuned to one another, even simple notes ring with beauty. Life is like that. The tuning is inner coherence. The song is what you create with it. You do not need to prove the law works. The beauty itself is proof. Notice, too, that creation in unity tends to serve more than the self. Projects become blessings, not just accomplishments. Work becomes contribution, not just survival. Art becomes offering, not just exhibition. Unity shifts your axis from, "How does this glorify me?" to, "How does this align with the whole?" Paradoxically, when you stop chasing recognition, your work becomes more recognizable. Not because you forced it, but because truth has a signature that people intuitively feel. Even obstacles become part of creation's rhythm. Delays that once infuriated you now become gestation. Rejections that once humiliated you now prune the path to what actually belongs. Failure that once proved unworthiness now becomes compost for deeper growth. Unity does not guarantee a frictionless road. It guarantees that every stone on the road can be integrated into the pattern. What Babel called catastrophe, unity calls raw material. As you live this way, you begin to trust the process at a level that was once impossible. You realize you don't need to know the full blueprint to take the next step. You only need to know today's line in the pattern. When you lay that line faithfully, tomorrow's line appears. It is less like building a tower and more like weaving a tapestry, one thread at a time, gradually revealing the image already embedded in the loom. This shift frees you from the exhaustion of proving yourself. The work itself becomes the testimony. The order inside you becomes the credential. And the fruit of your choices speaks louder than your explanations ever could. You find yourself less interested in convincing and more interested in completing. Less interested in comparison and more interested in coherence. The noise of Babel was always loudest when you doubted your own alignment. With unity, you no longer need the noise to justify you. The result is not pride, but peace. You can look at your life unfinished, imperfect, still growing, and see coherence rather than collapse. You can look at your work messy drafts half-built projects, uncertain outcomes, and see them as living processes rather than failed towers. And you can look at yourself, not flawless, not without contradiction, but steadily gathering, and know that creation is already happening. The song is already being sung. There comes a moment when unity is tested not by peace or productivity, but by suffering. It is easy to feel centered when the path is smooth, when projects flow, when relationships harmonize. But when the ground shakes beneath you, when loss strikes, when illness comes, when betrayal shatters, trust the true depth of unity is revealed. In these moments, the temptation is to slip back into Babel, to let the voices scatter again into panic, despair, or self-condemnation. Yet it is precisely here, in the crucible of pain, that the revelation of unity proves its worth. Suffering exposes what remains divided in you. When grief arrives, part of you wants to run, another part wants to fight, another wants to numb, another wants to cling to the past. The tower begins to rebuild itself in fragments. But if you allow spirit to hold the center, the scattered voices begin to soften into a deeper harmony. Grief becomes tenderness rather than paralysis. Anger becomes boundary rather than bitterness. Fear becomes prudence rather than obsession. Even despair, when brought into the circle, becomes surrender, an opening to power beyond your own. Unity does not erase pain, it reinterprets it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this suffering revealing about where I still live in division?" The pain becomes an interpreter, not an executioner. It reveals where your trust was placed in towers that could not hold. It shows you where you built your identity on approval, possession, or control, only to watch those structures fall. And as painful as it is, that revelation is mercy because it clears space for your identity to root in what cannot be taken from you. This is where the paradox of the cross, hinted at in all spiritual traditions, becomes alive. Every life has moments of crucifixion experiences that feel like the end of hope, the breaking of strength, the silence of heaven. Yet in Christian metaphysics, the cross is never the last word. It is the turning point where self-will dies and a deeper life is born. The suffering is real, the collapse is real, but it is not annihilation, it is passage. What feels like death to the ego becomes birth to the spirit. Think of your own seasons of pain. Recall the moments when you thought you could not endure. At the time, you were sure the loss would finish you. Yet here you are, still breathing, still seeking, still capable of love. The pain did not annihilate you, it altered you. It broke open walls you thought were permanent. It deepened your compassion for others. It stripped you of illusions that were weighing you down. The suffering was not wasted. It became a chisel, carving you into greater likeness with the divine pattern. The difference unity makes is in how you move through these seasons. Without unity, suffering scatters you, every part pulling in a different direction, every voice competing to explain or control the pain. With unity, suffering gathers you, it pulls all voices into a single cry, and that cry becomes prayer, not noise. The lament itself becomes holy because it is no longer fragmented. And in that unified cry, you discover a presence that does not remove suffering but walks within it, transforming its meaning. From this place, endurance becomes more than survival. Endurance becomes revelation. You begin to see suffering not only as something you endure, but as something that unveils truth. It reveals where your attachments lie, where your false securities are built, where you have mistaken towers for temples. And as each false structure is revealed, you are freed from its tyranny. You no longer need to cling to what is passing. You can rest in what endures. In unity, even grief can become gratitude, not because you are thankful for the wound, but because you are thankful for what the wound unveiled. Gratitude for the clarity gained. Gratitude for the compassion expanded. Gratitude for the realization that even in loss, you are never separated from the source. This gratitude is not sentimental, it is forged in fire. It does not deny pain, it sanctifies it. The fruit of such transformation is resilience. You no longer live in fear of suffering because you know it cannot break you into fragments again. You have walked through the fire and discovered that what is eternal cannot be burned. You have been pressed and found that the oil of spirit flows under pressure. You have been pierced and discovered that love still rises through the wound. And once you know this, you live with a kind of fearless tenderness strong enough to endure, soft enough to care. This is what Emmet Fox and other metaphysical teachers pointed toward, the realization that the spirit within is untouched by the storms without. Your true self, united with the divine, cannot be fractured by circumstance. The body may weaken, the plans may fall, the relationships may change, but the essence remains unbroken. And from that essence, a new kind of power flows, the power to walk through life without being mastered by its fluctuations. Unity does not promise a life without suffering. It promises a life where suffering becomes teacher, not tyrant. It promises that even when towers fall, you will not be destroyed. It promises that pain will not scatter you into noise but gather you into prayer. And it promises that every shadow, no matter how deep, contains a doorway into light. As unity takes root in you, its effects extend beyond your inner world and into your relationships. For Babel was never only an inner drama. It has always played out between people. The same scattering of voices that makes the mind chaotic also fuels conflict in families, workplaces, communities, even nations. When individuals are divided within, their divisions clash against one another, multiplying noise until whole societies sound like towers collapsing. But when unity is restored in even one life, it creates a field of coherence that others can feel. The presence of harmony in a single person can begin to heal the fractures of a group. Consider how easily division spreads. One person's fear sparks another's defensiveness. One person's anger awakens another's resentment. Soon, a conversation that could have brought understanding spirals into Babel's noise. Now imagine the opposite. One person's steadiness calms another's agitation. One person's willingness to listen invites another's vulnerability. A group that could have scattered into arguments instead finds itself settling into mutual respect. That is the power of unity in relationships, not the force of dominance, but the quiet magnetism of coherence. This is why the spiritual teachers often spoke of peacemakers. To be a peacemaker is not to avoid conflict, but to embody a peace strong enough to shift the atmosphere. When you carry unity within, you do not need to win arguments to bring change. Your very presence begins to untangle the noise. Others may not even understand why they feel different around you. They simply sense that you are not caught in the same babble that swirls around them. You are not adding to the static. You are tuning the environment to a clearer frequency. This does not mean relationships will suddenly become effortless. You will still face misunderstandings, differing values, and clashing temperaments. But unity changes how you engage those moments. Instead of reacting with scattered emotion, you respond from centered alignment. You no longer need every conversation to validate you, because your validation comes from spirit. You no longer need every relationship to meet every need, because your deeper need is already supplied. This frees you to love without grasping, to listen without defending, to forgive without erasing your own boundaries. Notice what happens when forgiveness arises from unity. In Babel, forgiveness feels like surrendering power, like letting the other person's wrong go unchallenged. But in unity, forgiveness is not weakness, it is the refusal to let someone else's noise scatter your own coherence. You forgive not because the offense was small, but because your soul is too large to live fractured. Forgiveness becomes self-preservation at the highest level. It keeps you in harmony with spirit rather than trapped in Babel's endless replay of grievances. Unity also redefines authority and relationships. In division, authority is control. Who gets to be right? Who gets to decide? In unity, authority is service. Who can best align with spirit to guide the whole? This shift transforms leadership, whether in families or organizations. Leaders who live from Babel demand loyalty, enforce rules, and cling to power. Leaders who live from unity inspire loyalty, embody integrity, and release power into others. One is fragile, always defending its tower. The other is strong, because it stands on a foundation that cannot be taken. As unity flows through relationships, communities begin to change. Conversations once filled with suspicion gain trust. Projects once stalled by ego find momentum. Conflicts once fueled by defensiveness open to reconciliation. Unity is not a utopia where disagreements disappear. It is a harmony where disagreements no longer destroy. The choir can hold many voices, even dissonant notes, without losing the song. In fact, the richness of harmony comes from difference held together by a common center. Think of the early followers of great spiritual movements. They were rarely perfect, rarely identical, often stumbling and disagreeing. Yet when they gathered in unity, the collective became more powerful than the sum of its parts. Their unity was not in uniformity, but in shared spirit. This same dynamic is available in every family, workplace, or circle of friends today. Unity does not require sameness, it requires alignment with what is greater than the self. This is perhaps the greatest gift you can bring to others. Not advice, not solutions, but presence. A presence rooted deeply enough in unity that others can rest in it, even if only for a moment. When someone speaks to you and feels truly heard, when they sense you are not divided while they pour out their division, they begin to heal. They borrow coherence from you until they can hear their own. This is ministry in its simplest, most powerful form. And as more lives embody unity, collective Babel weakens. The noise of society does not vanish overnight, but the static loses its dominance. More people speak from integrity rather than fear. More groups make decisions from clarity rather than panic. More communities embody service rather than control. The world begins to sound less like a collapsing tower and more like a rising choir. This is how unity moves from personal revelation to social transformation. It starts in the inner chamber of the soul, but it refuses to stay there. Spirit's coherence longs to ripple outward, touching every relationship, every system, every community it can reach. When you live in unity, you are not only healed, you become a healing presence in the world. As unity ripens in you, it matures into wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom that is merely clever or filled with sayings, but a deep clarity about the nature of life itself. In the scattered language of Babel, destiny feels like a riddle you are always guessing, always chasing, always worrying if you are on the right track. Time feels like an adversary, rushing you forward, stealing opportunities, leaving you stranded in regret. But when unity takes root, your relationship to destiny and time undergoes a quiet revolution. Destiny is no longer a tower you must climb. It is a path that unfolds one step at a time beneath your feet. You realize you are not required to see the entire road. You are only required to walk the next stretch with coherence. The anxiety of, "Am I missing my calling?" It dissolves, because you understand that your calling is not somewhere out there, it is already within you, waiting to be expressed in this moment. Unity reveals that destiny is less about reaching a destination and more about aligning with the pattern of spirit as it expresses through you right now. In this awareness, time stops being a tyrant. You no longer live as though you are racing against a collapsing tower. Time becomes an ally, a rhythm that works with you instead of against you. In Babel, every delay feels like punishment. In unity, delays become gestation, necessary pauses that allow the seed to root before it sprouts. In Babel, aging feels like loss. In unity, aging becomes harvest, the gathering of wisdom from seasons you once rushed through. Time has not been stealing from you, it has been shaping you for a fuller expression. This perspective gives you a calm authority over your own choices. You stop grasping at every opportunity out of fear of missing out. You stop regretting every past decision as though it ruined your future. You begin to trust that what belongs to you cannot be lost, and what is lost was never meant to define you. This trust frees you from the frantic energy of Babel and anchors you in a patience that is not passive but powerful. The fruit of this wisdom is discernment. You start to sense the difference between urgent noise and true necessity. You know when to act quickly and when to wait. You recognize which doors open from spirit and which are mere distractions. Discernment does not make every choice easy, but it makes them clear. You no longer waste as much energy second-guessing or defending. You move steadily, knowing that even missteps can be woven into the pattern when your heart remains aligned. Emmet Fox often reminded his listeners that divine order governs all things, and that when you align with it, life becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about recognizing patterns. This is wisdom, not imposing meaning, but perceiving the meaning already written into events. It is like standing on a hill after a storm. From the valley, the rain felt chaotic, but from above, you see the streams it created, the fields it nourished, the rivers it replenished. Unity lifts you to that hilltop. You begin to see your life storms in wider context, not as random punishment, but as elements in a larger design. As this vision sharpens, you also see that destiny is not just personal, but collective. Your story is interwoven with the stories of others, and wisdom teaches you to honor both. You no longer interpret every encounter only in terms of your advancement, but in terms of shared unfolding. The stranger you help on the roadside, the child you comfort, the friend you encourage. These acts are not interruptions. They are part of the tapestry. Babel made you obsessed with reaching the top of your own tower. Unity teaches you that greatness is woven through service, through participation in the whole. This wisdom also reshapes how you face endings. In Babel, every ending feels like failure. A relationship ending, a career closing, a season shifting, they all feel like collapse. In Unity, endings become transitions. They are not voids, they are thresholds. You begin to recognize that just as towers crumble to make space for harmony, so too do chapters close to make space for deeper expression. What once looked like finality now looks like reorganization under divine order. And when you face your own mortality, this wisdom speaks the clearest. Instead of clinging desperately to the tower of flesh, you begin to see your life as one verse in a larger song. Death is not Babel's silence, but Unity's passage. It is the gathering of your scattered days into a single note that joins the eternal harmony. This recognition does not erase grief, but it robs fear of its power. You know that the essence of you, the spirit already aligned with the divine, cannot be undone. Wisdom is not loud. It does not demand attention or argue for validation. It is quiet, but its quiet carries weight. When you speak from it, people listen, not because you shout, but because coherence has its own gravity. When you act from it, the effects ripple farther than you intended, not because you force them, but because order multiplies itself. Wisdom is the steady flame that burns long after noise has exhausted itself. In this way, unity matures into a way of seeing, a way of walking, a way of living that is less frantic, less scattered, less fearful. You still plan, but you do not cling. You still dream, but you do not despair. You still labor, but you do not collapse under its weight. Life remains complex, but it is no longer confusing. You are no longer building Babel, you are walking the path of divine order, step by step, breath by breath. When unity has matured into wisdom, it naturally begins to flow outward as service. For the whole purpose of the inner journey is not to sit forever in private harmony, but to let that harmony resonate through the wider field of life. What begins as personal clarity becomes a gift for others, a legacy that shapes not only your own destiny, but also the lives of those around you. This is the stage where the Tower of Babel within is not only dismantled, but transformed into a sanctuary from which healing, guidance, and strength can be shared. Service born of unity feels different from service driven by guilt, fear, or the need for recognition. In Babel, service often hides self-interest. You do good works but secretly crave approval. You sacrifice but quietly resent the cost. You give but expect return. In unity, service is no longer transaction, it is overflow. You give because you are full. You serve because you cannot help but let what is gathered in you flow outward. This kind of service never depletes you. It replenishes even as you pour out. Think of a candle lighting another. The first flame does not diminish when it shares its fire, it increases the light in the room. That is the image of unity's service. You discover that by offering your presence, wisdom, and compassion, you are not losing yourself but amplifying the harmony already alive in the world. Each act of service becomes a note in the great choir, and your note strengthens others. This service is not limited to dramatic gestures. In fact, the most powerful expressions often happen in the ordinary. A listening ear offered at the right moment, a word of encouragement spoken into someone's fatigue, a choice to act with integrity when no one is watching. These small acts, when done from unity, ripple farther than you will ever know. They carry a vibration that enters the hidden structures of another person's life, supporting them in ways you may never see. Legacy, then, is not about monuments or towers. Legacy is about resonance. The scattered builders of Babel wanted to make a name for themselves, to etch their glory into stone. But the legacy of unity is not carved into stone, it is carried in hearts, passed from one soul to another through the impact of presence. Long after your name is forgotten, the resonance of your unity can continue shaping lives. A child raised in the atmosphere of your peace carries that peace into their own adulthood. A colleague influenced by your integrity applies it in future choices. A stranger touched by your kindness may extend kindness to others in a chain you never witness. This is why Emmet Fox and other metaphysical teachers emphasized the silent ministry of thought. They taught that your inner harmony broadcasts itself invisibly, affecting people you may never meet. When you walk in unity, your very thoughts contribute to the collective field. Your prayers, even unspoken, travel beyond your personal circle. Your peace influences the emotional climate of your home, your workplace, your community. Legacy begins not with what you do, but with what you are. Yet service and legacy are not about perfection. They are about direction. You will still falter, still speak harshly at times, still stumble in your choices. But unity allows even these stumbles to be woven into the larger song. When you acknowledge your failures honestly, when you make amends, when you return again to coherence, you show others that legacy is not built by flawlessness, but by faithfulness. You demonstrate that unity is not a static state, but a living rhythm, a rhythm that can always be returned to, no matter how many times the static creeps back in. This perspective relieves the pressure of trying to control how you are remembered. In Babel, legacy is obsession. How will history judge me? Will I be important? Will I last? In unity, legacy is trust. If I live in harmony now, my influence will carry where it needs to go. You do not need to see the full impact. You only need to walk faithfully in the present moment. Legacy becomes the natural byproduct of coherence, not the frantic pursuit of self-preservation. And as you walk this path, you find joy in lifting others rather than climbing over them. You realize that true greatness is not measured by how high you rise above others, but by how deeply you help others rise with you. The old Babel instinct was competition. Who can build higher, faster, stronger? The new unity instinct is collaboration. How can we build together, in harmony, for the good of all? This is the mark of service, shaped by spirit. It is expansive, inclusive, and liberating. Ultimately, service and legacy are the flowering of unity. They are the proof that what began as an inner revolution has become a force strong enough to shape the world. When you live this way, you no longer worry whether your life has meaning. You see the meaning unfolding daily in the peace you bring, the clarity you offer, the love you embody. You no longer fear being forgotten, because you know your resonance cannot be erased. The towers crumble, but the harmony endures. The Tower of Babel within has been dismantled piece by piece, and what remains is not rubble, but revelation. You have seen how confusion can scatter thought, how division can fracture relationships, how suffering can expose false towers, and how unity, once embraced, can heal, guide, and transform. Now all of it draws together into one final truth. Unity is not just a practice, not just a state you visit in prayer or meditation. It is your original nature. It is the secret pattern beneath your life, waiting to be revealed in every ordinary moment. When the voice is quiet, when the noise softens, when the fragments gather into harmony, what you discover is not something foreign, but something familiar. It is as if you have remembered a song you once knew by heart but forgot amid the clamor. This is why unity feels like homecoming. The scattered parts of you do not disappear, they find their place in a greater whole. And in that wholeness, you finally recognize that you are not building toward God, not reaching up some endless ladder, but living from the divine that has always been within. From here, even the ordinary becomes holy. Washing dishes becomes a meditation. Walking down the street becomes communion. Speaking with a stranger becomes prayer. Babel once convinced you that sacredness was locked away in towers, rituals, or rare experiences. Unity reveals that the sacred saturates everything when seen with clear eyes. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is meaningless. The divine is not only above but within and around, pulsing through the simplest acts of kindness and the smallest gestures of integrity. In this recognition, fear loses its grip. You no longer need to prove yourself, because your worth is not built like a tower, it is inherent like breath. You no longer need to chase significance, because significance is not a destination. It is the way you live this very moment, in coherence with spirit. You no longer need to dread collapse, because you know towers were never meant to hold eternity. What endures is already yours. Unity does not end in isolation. It blossoms into communion. You realize your life is interwoven with others, each of you threads in a tapestry too vast to measure. And when you live in unity, you are not only aligned with your own pattern, but with the larger design, the cosmic fabric where every life matters, every act echoes, every soul contributes. This is the revelation. The Tower of Babel was never the true story. The true story is harmony beyond confusion, the eternal song still rising long after the tower fell. And so, you walk forward, not as a builder of fragile towers, but as a bearer of enduring harmony. Your steps become part of the greater rhythm. Your voice, once scattered, now joins the choir. Your life becomes both testimony and invitation. Testimony to the power of unity to transform even the most divided heart, and invitation for others to step out of noise and into the song. This is the revelation of unity beyond confused thoughts. This is the truth the Babel within had always tried to conceal. Now, as the journey closes, let the pace soften. You have walked through the ruins of the tower and discovered the sanctuary within. You have seen that confusion is not the final word, that division is not the final identity, that suffering is not the final sentence. The final word is harmony, the final identity is wholeness, the final sentence is freedom. Take this moment to notice the quiet inside you, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of presence. The silence that comes when the scattered voices no longer compete. The silence that is full, alive, luminous. In this stillness you can feel the pulse of spirit, steady and faithful, the rhythm that has carried you through every storm and will carry you still. Remember that you do not need to build another tower to find your place. You do not need to prove, perform, or perfect yourself into worthiness. You are already worthy because you are already one with the Source. Let this truth sink in. Unity is not something you must earn, it is what you are. The noise of Babel may rise again, but now you know how to return to the center, to the quiet song beneath the static. Carry this with you into your daily life. Let every act be touched by coherence, every word shaped by compassion, every thought aligned with truth. You will stumble, yes, but you will not be scattered. You will falter, but you will not be abandoned. The harmony within you is eternal, and as you walk in it, you become a beacon for others. The tower is gone. The song remains.